This week, What the Papers Say is presented by Peter Millar of the Sunday Times.
Good evening. At the beginning of this week, it looked as if we were going to have to retitle this programme.
What the papers should say.
The big story of last weekend was the leak, several weeks ahead of schedule, of the report by lawyer Sir David Calcutt proposing a wide-ranging series of restrictions on the activities of the press. The reaction of the newspapers was explosive.
Britain faces toughest ever curbs on freedom of the press.
Hands off your son!
The black hole of Calcutt.
And that from the newspaper which warned that it might have to change its masthead to read,
The news of the government.
The Daily Telegraph's Matt had his own vision of the brave new world.
Curbs on press.
Read a little bit about it.
Not often do the editors of Fleet Street all march together. This time they did.
Mr. Andrew Neil, Sunday Times, said,
The French have a neutered press, which is the poodle of the establishment. A disrespectful press is part of the democratic process we are in.
Sir David English, chairman and editor-in-chief of Associated Newspapers, described the idea of statutory controls as sinister, adding,
Only Nazi and communist regimes have ever brought the press under this sort of control in Europe.
And, also quoted in The Independent, the man in the hottest seat of all, Kelvin Mackenzie, editor of The Sun.
I am not going to have some clapped-out judge and two busybodies deciding what our readers want to read.
David Millar, the ex-minister for fun, had taken his toe from his mouth to warn the press that they were drinking in the
Last Chance Saloon.
And it seemed this week that last orders had been called. But the 7th Cavalry arrived on the front page of Tuesday's Guardian.
A royal pair recruited the press. The Prince and Princess of Wales recruited rival newspaper groups to reveal the details of their marital split. Revelations which have now become the main part of the government's case to place draconian curbs on the freedom of the press, according to a secret letter obtained by The Guardian.
A scoop in need is a scoop indeed. The letter was from Lord MacGregor, chairman of the Press Complaints Commission. It was written in December to the Calcutt Committee, and it gave details of Charles and Diana's attempts through intermediaries and officials at the Palace Press Office to manipulate press coverage of their marital row. As the Daily Mail put it,
Instead of the papers undermining the House of Windsor, as some MPs and ministers claim, the media was actually being exploited by the heir to the throne and his wife in an incredible public relations war.
Lord MacGregor himself was particularly aggrieved because he had come down heavily on what he called prurient reporting of the royal marriage and memorably condemned the press's behaviour as an
Odious exhibition of journalists dabbling their fingers in the stuff of other people's cells.
hard words indeed, particularly when it turns out that the cells concerned had pretty sticky fingers themselves. The disillusioned MacGregor's comment was succinct.
Nobody is entitled to complain about an invasion of privacy which they themselves have arranged and encouraged.
The Daily Star put it in the vernacular.
Palace of Porkies.
That's Porky Pies, lies. For those of you unfamiliar with Arthur Daly's English, how about that of Lewis Carroll?
Malice in Wonderland.
And to complete the mixture,
The Parrots of Buckhouse.
pretty sick parrots by now, I should imagine.
The toffs have made total twits of themselves. The marble mouths who hide their steel claws in velvet gloves simply didn't want you to find out what, it is now clear, had been common knowledge for months in the snobby world of royal circles and politics.
The villains were by now no longer the tabloids, but their erstwhile darling, Diana, now cast as a cynical media manipulator.
The great cover-up over Di's deceit.
Diana in the dock.
Diana gets the blame.
By contrast, Prince Charles smelt, faintly, of roses.
There is now ample evidence that the Princess of Wales sought to exploit the media. The Prince seems merely to have been their victim.
At this moment, an Australian women's magazine, with remarkable timing, squeezed an item between the recipes and knitting patterns.
Camilla Gate, the tapes that tell it all.
Yes, they published the full, uncensored transcripts of a taped telephone conversation which made the squidgy tape of Diana talking to her enamoured friend James Gilby sound like a session with a marriage guidance counsellor.
For the first time, amazingly intimate details of a sexy bedtime phone call between Prince Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles have shown just why Princess Diana pulled the plug on her sham of a marriage.
Sham? Shame.
In the touching late-night conversation, the depth of the star-crossed couple's love for each other and their desire to be together comes across with shocking frankness.
It certainly shocked the Daily Star, which also had a transcript.
Parts of which are too explicit for a family newspaper to report.
The newspaper today felt it couldn't report them either, and settled for a linguistic breakdown, like a computer critique of Shakespeare. Or maybe just a set of polo scores.
Tale of the tape.
By Neville Thirlbeck.
In the 1,574-word tape, the couple speak for 6 minutes. These are some of the intimate phrases used by them. Darling.
She 17 times.
He 7 times.
I love you.
She 12 times.
He twice.
Adore you.
He once.
Desperately need you.
She 3 times.
He once.
I want you.
He once.
Good night.
She 8 times.
He 15 times.
Goodbye.
She 7 times.
He twice.
Despite these mind-numbing statistics, the tape, inevitably dubbed Camilla Gate, was certainly hot stuff. Even the Sun felt it could not go all the way, but it did give us a taste.
The pair constantly declare their love for each other throughout the tape. Charles tells her.
I love you. I adore you.
Camilla says.
I do love you.
That was the romantic bit. Do let's press on.
Charles rings off, saying he will.
Press the tit.
The button on his mobile phone. Camilla replies.
I wish you were pressing mine.
The Sun turned the pair over to its resident agony aunt.
Camilla plays Charles like an old violin.
Says the Sun's dear Deirdre.
At long last, I've had the chance to read a word-for-word transcript of the Camilla Gate tapes.
By now, anyone who's anyone in the chattering classes will have seen it. The fax machines were churning all day.
To start with, there's no doubt Camilla Gate is Charles with his emotional corsets off.
Curiously, that's one fetish not alluded to.
These two have made love often. They know the sex works between them, and they can talk of it as a reliable tonic.
Well, that's deduction rather than fact. The transcript does not actually confirm the consummation of the relationship, though most of it is on a fairly basic level.
It reminds me of notes my kids and their friends have passed on the school bus. He revels in boyish sex jokes, lavatorial humour, reminiscent of the young ones, if not his beloved goons.
I can't believe Neddy Seagoon ever talked like this. Harry Seacombe's ears must be burning. Deirdre had obviously expected something grander, too. But instead, Red Bits, our decent family papers, felt they couldn't publish. The Times quizzed Fleet Street's editors on this.
News not fit to print.
And came up with some interesting answers.
Patsy Chapman, editor of the News of the World.
We would have published it.
Brian Hitchen, editor of the Daily Star.
I have no intention of inflicting this on our readers.
Dominic Lawson, editor of The Spectator.
I would not publish it. Firstly, it is an appalling invasion of privacy. Really disgusting, if it is true.
Peter Preston, editor of The Guardian.
We will not be publishing them either now or possibly ever. We are not sure they're genuine.
Donald Chelford, editor of The Observer.
I would rather not face the decision, and will be relieved if someone else takes it out of my hands.
There's a safe pair of hands. Only one paper did print the full transcript.
The Daily Sport.
In this case, the paper of record.
That tape inside in full, intimate, saucy, and shocking.
And there it was in full, with an exciting offer for any royals who might be reading.
Charles, the Queen, Philip, and the Queen Mother are said to take a keen interest in what the papers say if they don't like what the Daily Sport prints.
I don't think they're going to.
Then we'll make them a fair offer.